Good afternoon, everyone. I say hello from Colombia. My name is Carol Sabbadini. I'm a restorator and conservator of the artistic and cultural heritage and an artist. I have an MA in History of Art and Visual Arts from the Bologna University in Italy, and I'm a specialized in management of the audiovisual heritage. I have a master's degree in the language of contemporary image, photography, transdisciplinary practice, and video art at Fondazione Fotografia Modena in Italy. I'm the leader of the area of art, science, and technology of the District Institute of the Arts of Colombia. I was advisor in charge of the area of management of audiovisual and sound collection of Señal Memoria-RTVC, the public media system of Colombia. From 2016 and 2020, I was advisor on the use plan and the management model of the new Cinematheque of Bogotá. And since its inauguration, I was coordinator of the creation and experimentation area. I was member of the Preservation and Migration Commission of the FIAT IFTA, representing Señal Memoria and the South American perspective. I was also speaker in the Preservation and Migration Seminar 2022, Film and Television Archive, What is to be Done of FIAT IFTA. I like to say that I'm really glad to be part of this Congress from the distance. And I'm going to start sharing my screen so you can see my presentation. My talk is focused on the challenges of managing, cataloging, and accessing news archives that safeguard sensitive material or that make human rights violations visible. I will take as case of study a special collection from the Señal Memoria archive. Señal Memoria is the area in charge of safeguarding, preservation, conservation, cataloging, promotion, and circulation of the audiovisual and sound heritage of the public media system of Colombia, RTVC, which was created in 2004 with the aim of producing, programming, and operating public services of radio and television in the country. The Señal Memoria archive preserved approximately 450,000 documents, produced and broadcast by the national radio since 1940s and by the public national television since 1954. It also preserved films materials produced since the 1940s and a small photographic collection that is associated with these two media. The Señal Memoria archive is divided into fonts and collections. Collections work as macro containers that allow us to organize the material under a specific curatorial and thematic criteria. For the development of this presentation, I'm going to focus on the general collection of archived evidence and human rights. And on two other special collections, we refer to the political and historical and social history of Colombia. It is important to note that historically, Colombia has lived through an armed conflict that has lasted approximately 70 years, in which different actors have been involved and several peace processes have been carried out. The general collection of archived evidence and human rights brings together all those contents considered as sensitive material insofar as they show actions of violation of human rights, life and personal integrity of Colombian or foreign citizens, mainly in the framework of the internal armed conflict. Currently, this collection includes testimonies, interviews with witnesses of violence acts, homicides, kidnappings, and torture, between others, and is a restricted access collection. I'm going to focus also in another two special collections, Armed Conflict in Colombia, that refers to all content related to the history of armed conflict in the country. This collection registers a series of documents that allow us to carry out an analysis of the appearance of different armed groups outside the law from the decades of the 60s. The collection also accounts for the various ways in which the use of violence and armed struggle has been exercised in the country, as well as the emergence of drug trafficking, narco-terrorism, peace processes, and negotiation with the government and insurgent groups. As well, make visible the multiple actors that have been part of this process, victims, perpetrators, state agents, public forces, among many others. The Interconnect Special Collection of Newcast is also part of this presentation and is a case of study in which I'm going to focus. This collection integrates those audiovisual content dedicated to presenting news events, a recurring collection in the television archive, as you know. In this presentation, I'm going to base myself on a specific newscast that is part of this special collection, the 7 o'clock news. To start talking about this newscast, I'm going to give a brief context. Starting in the 1980s in Colombia, the newscasts had a short duration between 10 and 15 minutes and were normally broadcasted in the morning hours. Starting in the mid-1980s, the newscasts changed their time zone and began to have a premium one being broadcasted at 7 p.m. The newscast of the 7 and 7, Noticiero de las Siete, was an important Colombian newsreel produced by the programmer Programar Televisión that was established in 1983 by Juan Guillermo Rivas, that was one of the main presenters. The family of the ex-presidents Alfonso López Michelsen, Felipe López Caballero, the family Castaño Valencia, and Investment Restrepo. This program was on the air continually from 1984 to 2002 and was broadcast weekly from Monday to Friday at 7 p.m. This program stands out of the innovation of its format and for the thematic content it protects, which constitutes an invaluable heritage to reconstruct the historical memory of Colombia. Some of the most significant events in the country are recorded in the documents, and most of the significant events in the country are recorded in these documents. Some of them evidence two of the most violent times that the country has experienced, the 80s and the 90s, and this allows us to highlight the importance of these documents. I'm talking about the takeover of Palacio de Justicia, of Palace of Justice, the Armero disaster, the evolution of the Medellin and Cali drug cartels and their main exponents, the attacks and the wave of violence that hit the country, the assassination of politicians and relevant people, the development of the armed conflict in Colombia, referring to the multiple agents that have been part of this conflict, the FARC, the ELN, the guerrilla, the AUC, among others, the different peace processes, and the demobilization of the M19. I would like to show you a trail of the 7 o'clock of the 7 o'clock news. That way you can understand a little bit of what I'm talking about. To understand the newscast and the challenges that this intervention story presents, I'm going to talk about its characteristics. Approximately 7,000 hours of audiovisual material, masters in Dexicam and pneumatic formats with the problem of quality, technical failures, partial digitization, where is visible the violation of the integrity of the document, historical costs that are a result of the recording and digitization management processes. These documents are unpublished documents, which may have been broadcasted only once and were hidden in the archive. One of the elements that I want to highlight is the value of these records as primary sources for the understanding and reconstruction of the political history of the country, and as evidence for the clarification of truth. Regarding the intervention process and management challenges that represent working with this type of collection, I'm going to focus on the implication that must be taken into account. Most of the documents contain sensitive information of public domain. These documents allow rewriting history and creation of new stories and narratives. It highlights the value of the recording as a historical document and not only as an image to be used in another piece. and the ethical dimension of the archive and the role of the archivist. Regarding the intervention of this type of sensitive documents, which make visible the violation of human rights, I want to highlight the role of the archivist as an active subject in the historical reconstruction process through the work that they carry out in the validation of the documents as a historical records. In its contextualization, allowing us to have an objective view of the facts that these documents immortalize. Regarding the cataloging, I want to focus firstly in the description of the context and the generation of metadata. The challenges of the cataloging processes mainly is that since these are camera original masters, in general they don't have metadata or any type of reference. So in the description process, it is essential to try to answer who, when, where, and why. Regarding the historical analysis and the identification of the context, you have to take into account that these documents represent a multiple of actors and a perspective that can direct a certain vision of history that often lack objectivity and is biased. Here comes the work of the cataloger, reconstructing the original context like a forensic, finding the interconnections between the documents, the source of information where there is no metadata, and discovering the master documents. This also implies the ethical dimension of the archive and the cataloger responsibility as a participant in the process of denying, misrepresenting, or reaffirming the official historical narrative. We are in responsibility and we have the power to participate in the reconstruction and in the generation of new stories that can contribute to the clarification and resignification of the truth in countries like Colombia that have experienced a conflict with multiple victims. Regarding the terminology, research, and the standardization of terms, in the case of managing these documents, mainly in published images, there is often a need to internally establish terms that allow us to access to the documents, since in many cases they are not standardized or registered in thesaurus as is required. In Colombia, there is a Peace and Reconciliation Historical Memory Center that was created for the clarification of the truth and the reconstruction of the historical memory of the country, and have created a thesaurus for this type of processes. The terms refer to the themes, but in the case of handling this special collection of Señal Memoria, they were not adequate for the description required by the mission and by the audience to whom the archive is addressed. So, for instance, the term massacre, a systematic violent event which have occurred in various regions of Colombia and are known by name. The thesaurus of the Center of Memory, the global term is act of barbarism, associated terms, torture, beheading, flying, and massacre. We generate this term in our thesaurus and an associated term, the massacre, that we have registered, Mapiripan massacre, Trujillo massacre, El Aro massacre, as you can see in the diapositive. We knew that people was going to search these documents with the common word massacre, not as barbarism, not as an act of barbarism. So we decide to do these sort of things in our own intervention of this kind of archive. I want to show you a fragment of the material from the 7 o'clock newscast so that you have more clarity regarding what I'm referring to and to make visible the implication of this management, lack of metadata, who, when, where, and why.
para hacer la caleta. Estamos con Amalia, una guerrera revolucionaria de Colombia.
Yo diría que los medios masivos de comunicación son aquellos que llevan la noticia a los lugares más específicos del país, tales como
¿Entonces ya no puedo?
ubicado
Es porque van a matar. Van a...
me cargo de eso,
Tome algo mejor.
es que yo no puedo hacer eso.
¿Cómo?
Yo le dije, ya eso con él, y dijo, eso con mi pechero camine. Yo le dije, listo, yo me voy. Y entonces le dije que no me iba, le dije que no, pues mi mamá solo le dije, papá. Y dijo, no, te tienes que ir ya, y me llevaron.
¿A la mala?
Pues claro, yo de
¿Dónde vive usted, hermano?
yo tengo un...
¿Cuántos años?
This document shows us a fragment of legal information, only some graffiti on the walls. Here begins the almost forensic work of the cataloguer, where he must begin to research the years in which these massacres refer to, the place, the actor, his work of reconstruction of the facts to be able to make an objective description. The second fragment refers to the forced recruitment and training of minors as part of the armed conflict in Colombia, something that has been denied and continues to be denied by illegal armed groups. This allows us to show that this type of document ceases to be a journalistic element to become a testimony and an evidence of violation of human rights. Coming to the end of my presentation, I want to speak about access and use. This type of documents can put the lives of the people who are portrayed at risk, and in the same way, many of them being unpublished have not been validated by law. This means that many of these acts are still unpunished, and some trials are pending and still in force. These documents are normally used, and if access is allowed for special research, creation of new content and new stories, new documentaries, films, documents as evidence, testimony, or as proof. I have to say that in Colombia, there's a victim law, the 1448 of 2011. The law is the Reparation and Justice for Victims, established that the documents produced from the 1980s have a legal and historical status and can serve as evidence material in front of the law. In Colombia, this type of documents have begun to be a fundamental part of the JEP, the Special Jurisdiction of Peace, in this research for the reconstruction of the historical narrative and the clarification of truth. Here's some principles that we have to keep in mind. The protection of information versus the access to information. Contribution of the clarification of the truth and the reparation of the victims. The evidence of what and for what. Place of enunciation of the document. The reactivation of sources. The perspective of the conflict and the collective memory. The consolidation of an official narrative. The respect for human dignity and the potential damage. Here's a short video as an example of this.
Como se ve, no se ve un alma en este pueblo.
Somos el ejército del pueblo, haciendo justicia, porque hay corrupción entre la fuerza policial. Por eso venimos a levantar el puesto de policía.
¿Qué más pretende? ¿Qué pues, son o sea, lo de ustedes, la ideología de ustedes?
¿Cómo se me repite?
Sí, ¿y cuál es la ideología de ustedes en este momento?
La ideología nosotros hemos visto leninista. Luchamos contra el gobierno por tanta carestía, por tanta explotación.
¿En beneficio del pueblo?
Sí, en beneficio del pueblo colombiano.
Sí. ¿Qué le pide usted al gobierno en este momento?
Nosotros le pedimos justicia social. Sí, le pedimos justicia social.
¿Cuántos hombres en este momento tienen ustedes acá en el pueblo?
150.
150 hombres.
Se convierte.
¿No? ¿No pasa nada?
Quiero que eso no. Un bombacito ahí. No me dejan perder la tierra.
Bueno, ustedes pueden ver la tranquilidad de esta gente. ¿Cambió esto? Tiene aterrado la tranquilidad de esta gente. En este momento, ¿ustedes tienen conocimiento si hay algún herido? ¿Policías o de ustedes?
Está tapado el puesto, pero no se sabe. Tiene que haber herido. Con esas bombas, tiene que haber herido.
¿Cuántas bombas han sido explotadas?
Unas 6.
6 bombas han sido explotadas. Aquí,
Esto es una fábrica de FIAT.
sí, señor.
Allí, ve, allí.
¿Para qué se...
Ahora no le tengo una cara.
Espere, que ahí no hay nada. Ahí no hay nadie, hermano, ahí no hay nadie. Ahí no hay nadie, donde esté la gasolina no hay nadie.
Pero la tiendita aquí que no hay.
Más o menos 3 horas están.
Ahorita lo paramos, tranquilo.
This video that we have been seeing is evidence the multiple actors that have been part of this conflict and show a perspective of the story, the view of the victimizer. Is this his part of the story? Now, to conclude my presentation, I want to focus on 4 points. The audiovisual archive as a primary sources for the reconstruction of historical memory. We think the role of the public and private organization and archivists not only as a custodians of memory, but as an active participant in the process of research and clarification of the truth in countries that have suffered armed conflict as Colombia. And at last, the contribution to strengthening of laws that allow the protection and access to documents related to human rights violation. I have finished my presentation and I want to thank FIAT IFTA for this opportunity. So if you have questions or do you want further information, you can write to me. Thank you very much.